The definition of a spoiler alert is the disclosure of a plot element before it naturally occurs in a movie, a show, or a book. So you disclose a twist. You disclose the secret. You tell the end of the story before it happens. This morning, I want to begin with the spoiler alert. I am going to start with the end of the sermon. I'm going to tell you exactly where the sermon is going and the point that I think this gospel reading is pointing us to. The reason I do this is because I think that there are times in our reading of Scripture and in our preaching where I wonder if we get too busy trying to figure out why we don't see the full biblical reality in our lives. We try to rationalize something as to why it doesn't actually occur that way today. This is most pronounced in healing stories like what we have today. We read the story, or we hear about the healing, and we talk about the importance of faith, the power of Jesus, and we disclose this magnificent event in the person's life. But then when we get to the end, it's like we take an about face, and then we start saying, this is the reason why you won't actually discover this in your own life. Frankly, we try to explain the situation away. The healing of the leper, well, it was a kind of one-off situation. It was a unique event that won't be repeated in your life. Here are all the reasons why this can't happen to you, or why you can't expect it. Now, obviously, there is a nuance to healing. We live within a broken world, which we don't always see the reality, the full reality of God's presence and power. And God is not just this magic pill that we can go to whenever we need a new fix in our lives. Yet, there is a reality that is held out for us this morning. So this is where I will end in the sermon. Jesus makes a difference. Full stop. There are no caveats. There are no fine print. There are no detailed explanations that will just rationalize this to the point of stripping it away of its power. Jesus' touch in our lives brings power and his love. Jesus is the one who will heal. Jesus is the one to power. Jesus is the one to guide. He is the one who reaches into whatever situation we find ourselves in. And he is the one who is shown to be willing to do so. Will you go to him and receive his touch? If you wish to follow along, I invite you to pick up Mark chapter 1, and we start at verse 40. Our gospel reading begins, a leper came to Jesus. Now, leprosy was a term that covered a whole host of skin diseases. And I'm not going to go into all the detail about what it involved, but suffice it to say, it was horrible. It's horrible today because there are still leper colonies around, but it was particularly horrible back in the day with no modern medicine or things like that. Not only did leprosy destroy the person's body, it ate away at the skin and the muscle and the bones, but it also destroyed the social life of the person. They couldn't go into the city. Certainly couldn't go into the temple. They were cut off from family and friends. They couldn't work. So the only option that was left for them was to sit outside the city walls and beg for money. It's the only thing that they could do. To be leprous was to sit in pain. But not only kind of that physical sensation, think about that social one as well. Because if anybody came near to you, the leper had to put up their hand and say, unclean, unclean, unclean. Let people know exactly who they were. And so people would make an about face and walk the other way. Because you were there who was somebody who would harm them. Just by the affliction that you had. You were a danger. You were someone to be avoided. Now just think about that for a moment. Think about how depressing it would be to continually define yourself by your hurt, by your sickness, by your dis-ease. To continually say to anybody who came near you, this is who I am and you should walk away. think for a moment, what would you say? What would you name? Imagine if the first thing that you had to say to people was whatever you were facing, that disease that you carried. For me, imagine if every single day, if every person I met, before any conversation I had to put up my hand and say, heart defect, heart defect, heart defect. What if you had to say, shingles, hello shingles? Or cancer, cancer here, anybody, cancer, flu, depression. Imagine what it would be. How that would continually call this hurt to be reawakened in our lives. What would you say? What would you be crying out? What would that thing be that you live with, that situation that you are facing, that thing that seems to eat away at you? Leprosy sometimes was viewed as sin in these days. What is that sin that seems to haunt you? That which makes you believe that you are cut off from God. Each and every one of us, we all have a certain amount of brokenness in our lives. We all have a certain amount of dis-ease. What would you name? Now, we don't know how long this man lived with leprosy. We don't know anything about him except that one day he found himself in the presence of Jesus. Jesus came near. Jesus, as he went about his ministry, traveling between towns, came within this man's vicinity. And with this presence of Jesus coming very, very near, this man picked up his hurt body, his hurt and aching and sorrowful body, and he ran to Jesus. A leper came to Jesus, begging him and kneeling before him. And he said, if you wish, you can make me clean. Well, the Gospel of Matthew has this event directly after the Sermon on the Mount. Perhaps this man heard Jesus talk the Beatitudes. Blessed are you who mourn. Blessed are you who weep. You are invited into the reality of God's presence. Even you can be touched by God's power. Perhaps he had heard Jesus say, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. Or maybe he wasn't there, but he heard the rumblings that there was something different about this guy, that Jesus' words had power beyond anything else in this world, that when he spoke, demons fled and fevers left and health was restored. And so mustering all his strength and fighting through his own pain, he came as close to Jesus as he could, and he knelt down. What if we are in the presence of Jesus right now? Like lepers who gather in a colony, what if the church is a gathering of broken people who are all facing something? And we gather here and find ourselves in the presence of Jesus. What if this man, Jesus, is not just a character in a story. He's not just a myth or a fable. He's not just a speaker of morality or ethic. But what if he is the living and breathing Word of God who has come into our midst? Can you kneel down? Can you be honest about what ails you? Can you hold out your hurt? Can you hold out your doubt? Can you hold out your struggle? And can you say, Jesus, if you will, you can make me clean. If you will, you can take this from me. Now, some see that prayer of, if you will, as a prayer of doubt, as if this man didn't fully trust in Jesus. Charles Spurgeon renders this phrase, if it is in your compassion, or if it is in your commission, you can have compassion. It is a statement that this man is placing all of his hope in this man. There's this recognition that the power of God belongs to him alone. This man was coming with nothing. Nothing that he could point to meriting, deserve, or earning. It's not about what we have to prove ourselves. For this leper, kneeling before Jesus, it was tantamount to placing all he had at his feet, placing his entire life in his hands and saying, you have the power, and if you wish, you can make me clean. That is something that you can do. I trust it. and I believe it. Healing isn't about how good we are. It's not about whether we have anything in us to merit Jesus' power. Jesus' power in our life, his reaching into whatever situation that we hold, his healing power and his curing presence is not based on anything that we have to offer. It's rooted in his compassion. I am willing, Jesus says. I am willing. And he is moved in mercy. The words indicate that Jesus is moved in the depths of his being, in his gut, in the core of who he is. Everything that makes Jesus, Jesus, is moved in compassion and love and powerful mercy towards this man. And so he reaches out and he touches him. Now, let's not rush past this. This man would not have been touched for as many years as he had been a leper. There would have been no physical contact whatsoever. To touch him would be seen as making yourself physically and spiritually unclean. And also, to touch something would cause hurt and pain. So any sort of physical contact physically to this man would cause a certain amount of agony in his life. So no one would ever reach out and touch him. Imagine year after year, day after day, hour after hour, second after second, living with no physical contact, knowing that you were someone who physically people avoided, until Jesus reaches out. Suddenly this man, maybe his eyes are cast to the ground, maybe he's weeping and can't see through his tears, but suddenly he feels a hand on his head or a hand on his shoulder. The first touch in many years. And this touch doesn't bring with it the agony of physical pain. There is this soothing quality to it. This touch is warm. It is soft, but it is powerful. His hand is rugged, but it is loving. More than anything, there is this compassion in this touch. There is warmth in it. And with this touch, all of a sudden, he begins to change. And all that pain that he lived with, that pain that he was oh so familiar with, just flows away. And the skin that was broken now begins to heal. And this man's inner lostness, this man's inner pain, this man's inner sadness just begins to be filled with this joy and this love that comes flowing out of Jesus into him. Jesus not only touches his flesh, but in his heavenly grace, he reaches in and he touches his soul. This untouchable man is now embraced by the maker of the world. This unlovable man is flooded with the compassionate mercy of God. It isn't just the physical flesh that is cured. This man is healed in the deepest way possible. He is returned to wholeness in body and in soul. And so immediately he gets up and the leprosy leaves him and this man is made clean. And as a result, he goes rushing into the city to declare what Jesus has done for him. He declares it to all who would listen about the healing power of Jesus. And he doesn't try to explain it. He doesn't try to rationalize it. He doesn't try to say, now this is the magic prayer that I said that unlocked this power in my life. No, his witness was just this. This is what Jesus did for me. And that reality of Jesus' power to touch, to bless, to heal, it can be available to you too. So go to him. And that was so powerful. That message was so needed that people came to him from every quarter. They came and they claim and they claim because Jesus had power. And Jesus was willing to heal. We all have areas where we need Jesus to reach into our lives. We have things that we need to be forgiven of. We have struggles and we have doubts and we have hurts where we need his power. There are areas in our lives where we need healing. Let's not attempt to explain this away. Let us sit with the truth that it holds out to us. Jesus is the one who heals. He's the one whose touch brings power. What if coming to Jesus could make the difference for you? Would you dare to believe it? And so now here we have come to the end of the sermon. Jesus makes a difference. Full stop. There are no caveats. There are no fine print. There are no detailed theological explanations that will rationalize this to the point of stripping it of its power. The simple, the radical, the life-changing reality is this: his touch in our lives brings power and love. Jesus is the one to heal, to empower, to guide. He is the one who reaches into whatever situation we find ourselves in. And he has shown himself to be the one who is willing to do so. So go to him and receive his touch. Go to him in humility and power. Go to him and be open about whatever it is you face. And whatever it is that you need his compassion, his mercy, and his power. As our gradual hymn announced, turn your eye upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim, the light of his glory and grace. Amen.